As more and more people survive breast cancer, one question keeps coming up, and it's a big one. What should I eat? It's a question that's been debated for, decades. So today, we're going to cut through some of that noise. We're breaking down a major scientific review to see what the evidence actually says about the role of food after a breast cancer diagnosis.
This is the big question, isn't it? It's filled with so much hope, and it's one that researchers are working incredibly hard to answer. So after all these years of study, what is the science really telling us? Well, to figure that out, we're going to need a plan. All right, so here's how we're going to tackle this. We'll start with the big picture, just general healthy eating. Then we'll dive into the great fat debate. After that, we'll look at some specific foods that are showing real promise before, and this is important, getting real about where the evidence is still lacking and what the future of this research holds. Okay, first up, the foundation. We're talking about overall healthy dietary patterns. Before we get lost in the weeds talking about specific foods, let's just ask a simple question. What happens when you just eat a generally healthy diet?
And right away, we have our first key insight. The science is pretty clear that a healthy diet helps protect you from other causes of death, things like heart disease, and that alone is a huge win. But, and this is a key distinction, the direct link between that healthy diet and dying specifically from breast cancer, well, that's where the studies have more question marks. So the big takeaway here is a healthy diet is definitely great for your overall health, but its specific role in preventing cancer recurrence is still being figured out.
All right, now let's zoom in on one of the most talked about topics out there, dietary fat. For years, we've heard about low-fat diets, but the science here is a perfect example of why simple answers can be so tricky to pin down. And this slide, wow, this really lays out the challenge, doesn't it? You have two major studies. We're talking the gold standard of research here, and they came to totally different conclusions. One found that, yes, a low-fat diet lowered the risk of the cancer coming back. But another major study found no link at all. So, what gives?
Well, the reason for these contradictions often comes down to other factors getting in the way. Think about it. When people cut back on fat, they often lose weight. They also tend to eat more vegetables and more fiber. So, are the benefits coming from less fat? Or is it the weight loss? Or the extra veggies? It's just incredibly difficult for scientists to isolate only the effect of fat, and that's why we see these conflicting results.
So if the jury's still kind of out on low-fat diets, are there any specific things in our diet where the evidence is a little more consistent? Well, the answer is yes. Let's shift gears now from these broad patterns to some specific foods that keep popping up in the research.
First on our list is soy. What's interesting here is that multiple studies have found that a higher intake of soy foods is linked to a lower risk of what's called all-cause mortality, which is really just a scientific way of saying death from any cause after a breast cancer diagnosis.
And right alongside soy, we have dietary fiber. Just like with soy, a higher intake of fiber has also been consistently linked to a reduced risk of all-cause mortality for survivors. This really points to the general benefits of plant-based foods.
The third area that shows some promise is vitamin D. The research suggests that having high levels of vitamin D circulating in your body may be beneficial. And this effect seems to be especially strong for women who are starting out with low or what scientists call suboptimal levels of vitamin D.
Now, as exciting as those findings are, it's just as crucial to talk about what the evidence does not yet support. Being really clear about the limits of the science helps everyone make better, more informed decisions.
And this is a really critical point to understand. While whole foods like soy and those high in fiber show promise, the evidence just does not support taking most other individual supplements. The science simply isn't there yet to recommend specific vitamin pills to improve breast cancer outcomes.
And this might be the most important limitation of all. This quote from the review really highlights a major gap in the research. Most of these studies have been done on Western, postmenopausal women, and what that means is that these findings might not apply to Asian women, or to younger premenopausal women, or to other diverse groups of people.
So, all of this naturally brings us to a really important forward-looking question. Given what we know, and what we don't know, what's the path forward for scientists who are working in this field?
Well, the roadmap for researchers is actually pretty clear. It all starts with diversity. They need to study different populations to see if these findings hold true for everybody. From there, they need to zoom in on specific subgroups, like women with different types of tumors, to see if the advice needs to be more tailored. It's only by taking these steps that they can build a strong enough evidence base to create truly reliable guidelines for all survivors.
And that leads us to our final, and really the ultimate question. The goal here isn't a one-size-fits-all diet. It's to understand the science so deeply that we can provide truly personalized advice for every single survivor based on their unique biology, their background, and their specific diagnosis. That is the future this research is building towards.